but now he's carved his way through a 42-person field. He's playing a very unorthodox deck with the Galactus characters people thought were useless, and he has found a really innovative and brilliant way to play him, along with a great event set that, again, nobody is playing, and he recognized the value.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Overpower Mountain podcast. Oh wait, that's not right. That's not this show. Welcome to Prodigy Overpower. We discuss everything rules, everything strategy, and everything theory crafting here. Thanks for being here. Today we're going to talk about deck building, beginner to intermediate. We're going to cover 11 topics, starting with evaluating character threat level, achieving grid cohesion, the strategic reserve character, making your home-based choice, understanding duplication, navigating card counts, leveraging events, mastering the spectrum, building a robust defense, understanding your playstyle, dealing with your opponent's deck. So let's get right into it. Topic 1, evaluating character threat level. So in Overpower you have a 4-man team, never more, never less. And you have 76 points to spend on that team. So character's threat level is very important. That decides who you can afford, who you can't afford. So take Tarzan, for example. He has a 19 threat level. You could have 4 19-point characters on your team. You could have 3 in the front line, 1 in your reserve, 19, 19, 19, 19. That's your 76, good to go. Alternatively, you could go with one of the more pricey characters, like Dracula. He's a big old 22. You could take what I refer to as a luxury character, a character without an 8 that costs, more than the base 19, like Van Helsing here. It's got good specialists to go with him, but we'll get into that. Or lastly, like Mr. Hyde, somebody super cheap who kind of gives you points you can use elsewhere. As soon as you buy a 16-point character, you can then afford a 22-point character because they pay for each other, right? So you got to play with the math a little bit here. The most important thing, I think, when designing your team is you got to make sure, this really is probably the most important thing, you want to have one character with an 8 on your team. At least one. Ideally 2, but having access to a level 8 power card that your opponent does not is just absolutely huge. Like, I know there's going to be some guy in the comments who's like, I have a max 7 deck and it's great, and I smash my 9-year-old nephew with it. That's great, man. That's excellent. Good for you. But, like, you can't bring a max 7 deck to a tournament. Like, you have to have at least one 8 grid in your character. So, brings us to topic 2, achieving grid cohesion. Every character in this game has a different grid, and they're going to line up very well with some other grids. They're going to be polar opposite of some, and, everywhere in between. So the reason that you want to have similar grids on your build is because in this 4-on-4 game, as soon as someone goes down, you lose the ability to play cards that they can play. So that is that character's special cards. Can't use those anymore. And sometimes certain power cards or universe cards. If you have, for example, Zorro, and he's on the same team as Hercules, and you have 3 different power cards. You're using the any power so that either of them can use it, and then the 8 brute force, and then the 8 combat. Well, what happens when Zorro drops, right? Like, and then you draw your 8 combat. Hercules can't use it. So, a better grid matchup would be like you put Leonidas with Zorro instead, right? So either one of them drops, and then your 8 combat is still viable. You could still play it, or, appropriate teamwork. So you really want to have some sort of grid cohesion or backup. You want to have your characters to have the ability to play the cards that the other ones can also play. Overlap is good because if you lose one, it's less risky. You usually want to kind of follow characters like let's say Captain Nemo and Count of Monte Cristo. They both have excellent grids. Like if you could run the 6 combat teamwork in that deck, and a 6 intellect and a 7, and either one of those characters die, either one can play all 3 of those teamworks. They have the same because of the grids. So it's pretty important. The reserve characters. So when we talk about the reserve, it can sometimes be, honestly, like, I've seen people put points into the reserve character, like run someone awesome like Morgan Le Fay. She's expensive, but she has two like really awesome specials that are playable from reserve, so she's pretty great. Or like Victory Harbin, for example, she can protect the team from back there. But again, you're paying points for a reserve person. Ideally, in a game of Overpower, your front line holds. Nobody dies, or excuse me, nobody's KO'd, and so you don't need your reserve character. So in theory, like, oftentimes I see a throwaway character in the reserve, right? You just jam a 16-pointer back there, which gives you 3 additional deck building points to put on somebody else, and then you just make a mean, nasty front line, right? Like, you just put everything in the front line. And there's some merit to that. In this new version, there isn't a lot of incredible reserve characters, and the ones who are good back there, they're expensive. So really kind of think about where you want to put your points. And sometimes the reserve, I think they're going to catch people off guard, and sometimes it's going to be a waste of points. Next, you're going to choose a home base. You have a whole bunch of different options to choose. When I say next, deck building is a whole process. You're going to go back and forth and change your mind multiple times, so there is no step-by-step here. When you choose your location, some locations actually cost points because they give you like little mini sideboard, like Spartan Training Grounds. I love that one. Or Dracula's Armory. These locations cost points, but they're worth it. If you can build some tricky, weird decks and have access to extra universe cards that don't count against your total card pool. You're trying to go card for card against your opponent here. So, you can go with something that's free, like the round table, so you can place any character there. You could try and do something thematic, like Baker Street, where you're trying to peek at your opponent's cards and make them discard. You could do, you have some of the characters with the regeneration or the ability to heal a hit that they've taken in a previous battle, remove a hit from permanent record. You can run Ascapellion and heal and do the instant attack. That can immediately just turn a fight like nothing. Your location, it is fairly important, but it's not the most important thing. Understanding duplication. So this blends into the following topic: the amount of specials, power cards, and universe cards in your deck. So duplication. There's a lot of overpower cards that say 1 per deck. 1 per deck because they're so good you can't use multiple of them, okay? There's also cards that are so good and they're non-1 per decks and you want to play a bunch of them. But Overpower has this thing, duplication. If you have a duplicate, you have to throw the card away. And in a card for card game, like, that's so huge. It's such a big thing. So there are cards like an 8 power card, for example, where that's so valuable because it's both an attack and a defense. Like, and power cards are fuel for teamworks. It's like an all-purpose. So most people have like 3 of that in a deck because you got to risk occasionally duping on it because it's so valuable and you need multiple. You can't just have 1 and have it in the bottom of your deck. So you kind of want to try to find a delicate balance. There are some certain cards like let's say the Hercules 7. He can defend his entire team with that, or he can attack with that. Like, that card is so nasty. Why are you playing? You have to run at least 3 of it. You have to have 3, maybe more in a control deck. Like, you can't. So for the most part, kind of assume everything is 1 per deck, but the really good cards, they might be worth running 2 or 3 of, but you don't want to get hog wild and crazy because as soon as you start duping and you have to throw your cards away and your opponent, if his deck is built better than yours, that's a big price that you're going to have to pay. When it comes to the amount of special cards, power cards, universe cards, this all varies by deck, but I'd say just as a general staple, if you're making like a lean, mean 51 or 56 card deck, which is mostly the standard, most people are running, I think, 5 to 8 specials per character. I mean, that will go up and down. Occasionally you have a reserve character who sometimes has no specials, sometimes has a few. But in general, I think that's kind of the sweet spot, 5 to 8, 9, something like that. I do have a crazy control deck that has 85 cards, and all the frontliners have at least 13 specials. One of them has 14, I think. So, I mean, things can get crazy, but just remember that as soon as your character is your is KO'd, like if your opponent KOs one of your characters, you could no longer use their specials. Every time you draw one, it's a dead card. So you got to keep, you want to keep your guys alive while simultaneously knocking out your opponent's guys. Next, we have events. Events are, thank goodness, nowhere near as much of a big deal as they were in the last game, but they still can be game-changing. For example, this any power becomes brute force for the rest of the turn. Just that flips, and let's say you have Merlin, right? Merlin, and you have a 7 any power placed on him. Merlin has a 7 energy, so he's good to block with that. He's good to attack with that. As soon as this event comes, all of a sudden that 7 any power becomes brute force. Merlin ain't strong enough to throw that. He can't defend with it. He can't attack with it. He can't nothing. He's locked out of using his own card. So events can sometimes get you. So events are good to be aware. Every time you check an event, I would recommend being like, is this good for my team? Is this a good event set for my team? And like while you're browsing, also think like, would this event be really bad if I came up against it? So keep that in mind when deck building as well. Another important part about Overpower is the spectrum. So in order to KO an opponent's character, you need to do at least 20 points of cumulative damage, or you need to spectrum them. And that means that they have 3 of the 4 icons as some sort of hit. The hits don't even have to have value, they just have to have the icon as a damaging hit on the character. And of course, there is the total dead rule, which means that if somebody has 20 damage and 3 colors, then they're KO'd regardless of any inherent abilities. So you kind of got to go one of the 2 ways to knock somebody out. And it's just smart to build your deck in a way where you're going to spectrum more often, hopefully, than even getting to 20. Like obviously you want big attacks and because you need venture, but you also want to be able to KO people by just getting a couple little hits in. Maybe you have 2 medium to low specials and then just 1 multi-power. That's enough to KO somebody. So you want to make sure that you have equal amount, because you don't want to have, like we talk about on suit and off suit. If you have a combat deck and you have 90% of your attacks are combat, then even if your opponent has, a whole bunch of hits, they can just afford to keep taking those hits. They can keep taking them because it's not going to KO their character. And you don't want that. You want every hit to be threatening, either a lot of venture or threatening, we're getting that character close to death or at the KO point. So dividing out and seeing the amount of how many energy attacks do I have, how many combat attacks, how many brute force attacks, how many intellect, and then how many multi-powers to pay attention to how often you're going to get a spectrum is very important. Topic 9, building a robust defense. So your Overpower team is like a boner in a whorehouse. They're only as good as their protection. You have 3 main different kinds of defensive special cards in Overpower. You have negates, avoids, and blocks. So avoids and blocks are kind of the same thing. Negates are an incredible card that just completely waves away a special while it's still in the astral plane, just erases it. Negates are incredible. Negates can also be used to protect Zeus, as it's not technically a defense, but it is primarily used as a form of defense. They can also muddy up something that your opponent is trying to do with a strategy, a grid boost or a side card or something like that. And then you have avoids. You have a whole bunch of characters that have avoid one attack. Teammate may avoid one attack. Sometimes they're contingent upon a certain icon, but they block an attack, sometimes do something else. But these are very, very clutch cards. You need to protect your characters. And then we have blocks. So we have Tars 6, if he's on the same team as John Carter. You have the Zorro 5. You have the Hercules 7 that I alluded to earlier. There's a whole bunch of ways of defending your team with those style of cards. And there's also some that are not able to be used for attack, like King Arthur and Korak have a teammate may avoid 6 or less if they're respective allies on their team. So any of these type of characters are extremely valuable because they protect everyone. There are some characters who only protect themselves or only protect someone else. So defense is important and it wins championships. Understanding your play style. So let's say you go to a tournament and you sit across from somebody and you play a game against him, and he's got Merlin, Zeus, Jane Porter, Dr. Watson, Baker Street, and he's doing all sorts of weird stuff. He's taking peeks at your hand and making you discard stuff. He's milling his own deck with the Merlin card and making a god hand, or going down to like his top 16 cards, something like that. Or he, resets the Venture, the big Zeus card. Like that's a Johnny player. That's somebody who wants to pull off, cool combos and catch you by surprise. And then, we have you look across the table, your next opponent, and he's got Leonidas and Zorro and Korak and Jane Porter in the back, and you see Dracula's Armory, and you're like, how am I gonna get through that? Korak has an avoid 6 or less. Leonidas has a 1 protect team avoid, and he can defend himself with his 8. Zorro has a 5. Oh no, wait, that's a 9 or less protect the entire team when stacked with sorry, I said Dracula's Armory, I meant Spartan Training Ground. Like, how are you gonna get that's a Spike. Okay, Spike is there, he's there to win, he's there to wreck you. And then your third opponent, you show up and you see Sun Wukong and Lancelot and Captain Nemo with a throwaway reserve character, and you're like, what is this? And you think about it for a second, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. It's a Timmy deck. Sun Wukong's got the 11, Lancelot's got the 10, Nemo's got the 10. I bet he's got the Cataclysm 10 in there as well, just so he's trying to 2-shot your guys. Timmy trying to 2-shot, just 3 10s and an 11. That's a Timmy deck. Play big cards. They like to draw 3s. They like the big, powerful impact moments. So figuring out what kind of player you are between the 3, most of us are some form of hybrid. It will teach you something about yourself and your own deck building. You will naturally gravitate to certain cards and combos depending on the type of player that you are. So that's something to keep in mind and also be aware of with the opponent that you're facing. Which brings us to our last topic, dealing with your opponent's deck. Whenever you're building yours, you can go for fun, you can go for cool, you can go for whatever. But as far as viability, remember that your deck isn't being played against the computer with mooks. Your deck is being played against another deck that has 4 heroes, same as you, and they might have nastier or crazier specials that do a whole host of different things. And me personally, I like to know how my deck is going to fare. So these are also things to keep in mind while you're building. How is my deck going to, how is it going to deal with the Leonidas and Zorro combo? What's my deck going to do against a Zeus control deck where he just somehow fit 10 Thunderbolts in his deck? Just 9 every turn, like 2 a turn. Like how are you going to deal with that? What if there's some tricky lockout stuff that we haven't seen where you completely are unable to, make your opponent unable to attack your characters completely? There's so many different things to keep in mind and pay attention to. And we don't really know. We kind of make guesstimates on what the meta is going to be like, but we don't really know until we get there. I have my suspicions. I think the top 3 characters are Hercules, Zorro, and Count of Monte Cristo. And I think every character in this set, except for 1, is playable. And I think that it's going to be a lot of fun with a shifting meta. So keep these things in mind when building your decks. Thanks for watching. Post your favorite team down in the comments and what you're most looking forward to with the set, and if you have any other ideas going forward. Thanks a bunch.